Hello, my power plants, and welcome to this week's countdown. Now, you may remember a few weeks ago, I did a top 5 final bosses. This week's countdown, top 5 opening bosses. Now, my philosophy on opening bosses and final bosses are the complete opposite of each other. For a final boss, a good fight is nice, but I'm more interested in the aesthetic. I like to have something to chew on after the game is over, which is primarily why Marluxia got on the list, but none of the Xemnas fights did, or none of the Xehanort fights did. And I feel, on the other hand, that a opening boss needs to serve as sort of getting your feet wet, a way to get a feel for what's coming for the rest of the game. A good opening boss, at least. But without further ado, let's get started with this list with number 5, Rongo Longo. Now, this guy is from, in my opinion, the criminally underrated Kelowna series. Or, Kelowna? There's some way else people pronounce it that's slipping my mind right now. Klonoa, that's it. And it's a pretty... this boss in particular is from the Doors of Phantomile. And I've only ever played 3 of the Klonoa games, but I've loved them all. But this one stands out as the first boss. Not just because it serves well to demonstrate how most boss fights are going to play out, but also because it gives us our first real glimpse into at the primary protagonist, who just throws Rongo at you with the air of, "Here, deal with my lesser minion, you insignificant insect. I do not have time for you." Also, I very much appreciate the fact that Joka is there telling Rongo Longo to watch his behind. Not that it does much good. But anyway, a good opening boss to set the tone for the game, I feel. Next up we have number 4, Guard Scorpion. Now, Guard Scorpion in and of itself is a pretty bog standard fight for Final Fantasy VII bosses. He's big, he's mean, and he'll do a lot of damage if you're not careful. However, what elevates this opening boss fight is that it teaches you something. It teaches you not to listen to every fool thing that comes out of Cloud's mouth. And this lesson becomes more and more potent as the game progresses. And I find it's interesting how something as innocuous as a single box of text in the first boss fight can be a precursor to something so major in the plot. Or maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Either way, that's why Guard Scorpion is on this list. Next up, we have number 3, Twin Belos, the Ferocious, from Kid Icarus Uprising. Now this guy, he combines some of my favorite things. He's a puppy, he's a hellhound, and, like the pyro that I am, he has fire. What's not to love? There's also the way that he leans you in to how boss fights will work in the Kid Icarus Uprising games. Usually there's a big arena, usually there's a bullet sponge, and usually there's something that's going to do a lot of damage to you if you're not careful. I also find that Twin Belos, the Ferocious, and yes, he does insist on that ferocious part, don't forget, unless you want to wind up his chew toy. I find that he is perhaps, if not one of the most straightforward opening bosses, then at least one of the easiest to come to terms with. After all, he is the first, and that's important. But that's enough of me rambling on that particular subject. Let's move on to number 2, the Asylum Demon from Dark Souls 1. Now, the Asylum Demon, I feel, teaches you very well the 3 main ways you can deal with something in Dark Souls. You can either go the intelligent route, which in this case is to use your position of height to jump down on top of the Asylum Demon, dealing a good chunk of his HP and making the subsequent fight easier. You can do it the hard way, which is to just jump down without doing the jump attack and just wail away at the Asylum Demon and hoping it dies before you do. And the third way, playing like a pansy and ramming your sword up its butt in order to limit the Asylum Demon's ability to attack you. Now, it should be noted that any of these 3 options can be intermingled, but these 3 options are usually what you can find in just about every Dark Souls boss from the Asylum Demon onward, and I feel that's a great method of teaching the player what to expect moving forward. There's, in almost every boss, there's something you can do to find an exploit, go mano a mano and just ram your face against the wall, or play like a pansy. I find it to be very, very interesting and a well-designed first boss fight. However, the number 1 spot on this list goes to someone who does this and a little bit more. I'm talking about our number 1, the False Knight from Hollow Knight. Now, when you first start Hollow Knight, you're just this little bug with no name who's exploring a kingdom that has fallen. When you come across the Fallen Knight, at first, he looks huge, massive, easily many times your own size, and you're expected to beat it. But as the fight progresses, and after you beat him, you discover that this whole time, the False Knight was actually a bug about the same size as you. And while the boss fight, and by the way, when I was poking around the internet recently, I was deeply surprised by the number of baby back pansies who were like, oh, I can't beat the False Knight. The False Knight is too hard. Woe is me. And I'm like, if I can beat the entire diddly darn game, including DLC super bosses, then y'all got me, who's chronically, terminally awful at games, can beat it, then I don't want to hear none of y'all's complaining. But anyway, so you find the False Knight is a small grub about the same size as you, and the boss fight is fairly straightforward. You attack, you wait for its weakness to be revealed, and you attack some more. But what really strikes me about this boss fight is how the False Knight is what you could have been. Now let me explain. In Hollow Knight, your eventual end goal, mindful of spoilers here, is to overthrow the titular Hollow Knight and take its place. The False Knight, as mentioned in the Hunter's Journal is a small bug that looks to steal the strength of others, basically. To pretend to be bigger than it is. And that could have been the knight. But instead of letting some lust for power consume him, he becomes stronger because it's his duty. There is no want or desire to become stronger with the knight. It's just a matter of fact that he will become stronger because his duty demands it. And I felt that on top of being a good litmus test for the rest of the game, this bit of personal lore was enough to snatch the #1 spot for the False Knight. And there you have it. Rongo Longo, Guard Scorpion, Twin Belos the Ferocious, Asylum Demon, and False Knight. Thank you for joining me for this countdown. Thank you, everybody. And in the comment section below, please tell me who your favorite first boss is. And until next time, like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, ring the little dingly bell, and if you would be so kind, get off my lawn, you filthy casual.